In the spring of 1874, the town of Dry Creek was barely more than a whisper on the Wyoming frontier. A few weathered storefronts, a church that leaned ever so slightly westward, and a post office that doubled as a general store. The wind here didn't just blow, it remembered. And folks kept their stories close. Like the last embers of a fire they weren't ready to let die. Luke Ramsey had never been much for stories. He ran cattle on a patch of land a few miles out of town, quiet and steady, 38 years old, no family to speak of, and a barn that creaked louder than he did. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't warm, either. Folks said he was carved from the same stone as the hills behind his ranch, firm, silent, and weathered by loss. So when he walked into the county office one morning with a woman on his arm and asked for a marriage certificate, the clerk nearly dropped his spectacles. Her name was Anna. She stood tall but not proud, dark eyes, long braid, a worn shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. She spoke with a soft accent, the kind folks in Dry Creek didn't hear often. Mexican, maybe, or Spanish. No one was bold enough to ask. Luke signed the paper with a slow hand. She signed hers quicker. No kiss. No smiles. Just a stamp, a nod, and 2 sets of boots, walking back out into the dust. Later that day, the whispers began. She's not from here. Mail order bride, maybe. Green card marriage, though no one in 1874 really knew what that meant. But the truth was simpler. Anna had been living in the territory for 3 years, working at the mercantile, helping raise another woman's children after their mother died in childbirth. But when the widow remarried, Anna no longer had a place to stay, and with her foreign name and no family, the law was clear: she'd be deported back south. Across a border she hadn't crossed in years, unless she married. Luke had been the one to offer. No romance, no promises, just, I got room. I don't talk much, but I won't bother you if you don't bother me. Anna had looked him in the eye. Deal. And just like that, they became husband and wife on paper. But paper doesn't teach you how to share a kitchen, or what to say when the silence gets too heavy, or what to do when the woman you married, just to keep around, starts to feel like the only thing keeping you here. 2. Have you ever made a decision out of duty, only to discover it led you to something deeper? Share your thoughts below. The first days passed quiet. Luke made coffee before dawn, like he always had 2 cups now, instead of 1. He set hers by the window seat, without saying a word. She drank it in silence, hands curled around the tin mug like it held more than just warmth. She kept her things in the small bedroom, off the kitchen, the one that used to store sacks of barley and rusted tools. He never asked if she liked it, she never complained. Anna cleaned. Not in a showy way, just with quiet efficiency. The floors stopped creaking where she mended loose boards. The windows, once so caked in dust they turned the sunlight gray, now let morning spill in like gold. She patched his torn shirts with thread she brought from town. Not because he asked, just because they needed mending. Luke noticed, and that bothered him more than he thought it would. One afternoon, he returned from tending cattle, to find the old cast iron pot bubbling on the stove, the scent of tomatoes and cumin filling the kitchen. He stood there, hat in hand. She didn't turn around. You hungry? He nodded. She ladled stew into 2 bowls and set them on the table. Her movements quiet, deliberate. They sat across from each other, eating in silence. The stew was good, better than good, but Luke didn't say a word. Until halfway through, when he finally asked, "Where'd you learn to cook like that?" Anna's eyes lifted, amused. "I worked in 3 kitchens before I could spell my own name." Luke blinked. "You couldn't spell your name?" "Not in English," she replied. "Didn't need to. Taste speaks first." He nodded slowly. "It does." A long pause. Then she asked, not accusing, just curious, "Why'd you really do it?" Luke didn't look up from his bowl. "Do what?" "Marry me." He chewed another spoonful, swallowed, then said, "Didn't sit right. The idea of someone being sent away, just 'cause they didn't belong to the right name. Or didn't come from the right dirt." She waited. He continued. "Figured I had more space than I needed. And you looked like someone who'd been let down enough." That made her pause. Anna set her spoon down. "You don't talk much." "No," he agreed. "But you listen," she said. He looked at her then. Really looked. She wasn't just surviving here. She was adapting, changing the rhythm of the house, slowly, without force, like water around a stone. And he realized something. It wasn't her who didn't belong. It was him who had been drifting for years, in his own home. That night, he heard her humming softly as she swept the kitchen. A tune without words. A sound that made the house feel inhabited, not just filled, lived in. He lay awake longer than usual, listening to the floorboards, the stove cooling, the wind brushing past the eaves. And in that silence, a thought settled in his chest like warm coffee. Maybe she didn't just need a place to stay. Maybe they both did. The wind started before sundown. At first, it just pressed gently against the windows, like a child testing a locked door. But by nightfall, it howled down from the hills, dragging dust, snow, and the scent of cold danger with it. Luke bolted the door. Anna checked the shutters twice. Inside the cabin, the fire roared hot, but the air still felt heavy. Like the storm wasn't just outside, like it had come looking for something inside them. 2. When the first branch snapped in the dark, Anna flinched. Luke noticed. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, then paused. "Storms sound different here." "How so?" "In the south, they come fast and leave fast. Loud, wild, full of rain. But here," she looked toward the window, "it sounds like it's searching. Like it doesn't know what it wants." Luke stared into the fire, the glow catching the edge of his stubbled jaw. Maybe it doesn't. They sat in silence for a long time, the wind pressing against the house like a beast too big to be seen. Anna pulled her shawl tighter. "You ever get scared?" He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "Used to think I didn't. Then my brother died. Got caught under a wagon during a cattle drive. I wasn't there. Should have been." Anna looked over. He hadn't spoken of family before. "After that," he said, "I learned real fear comes after. When you're left with the silence." Anna nodded slowly. "I know that silence." She pulled her chair closer to the fire. "My mother died on the trail," she said, voice steady. "We were crossing near Santa Fe. Fever took her fast. My father buried her with a kitchen spoon. It was all we had left of her cooking. He didn't say a word for 3 days after." Luke turned toward her, something softening in his chest. "Where's he now?" She shrugged. "Maybe back south. Maybe under the same dirt." The wind howled louder. The shutters rattled. Luke stood, tossed another log into the fire, then did something neither of them expected. He sat beside her, not across the room, not in his usual chair, beside her close enough for warmth. Not so close it meant more, but maybe it did. "You don't talk much," she said again, but gentler now. "No," he said, "but I think I'm starting to learn." She smiled faintly. "Good, 'cause I think this place has more to it than silence." The wind pressed against the door once more, but neither of them moved. They just sat there, two souls who'd learned the language of quiet, now discovering the beauty of being heard. The morning after the storm was unusually still, the kind of stillness that comes when the world is catching its breath. Frost glittered along the fence posts, and the pine trees out back stood like sentinels coated in silver. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, slower than usual. Softer. Luke stepped outside with his coffee, boots crunching on icy soil. He walked the fence line, checking for damage, something he'd done after every storm since he bought the place. But this morning felt different. Maybe it was the way the cabin behind him no longer looked empty. Inside, Anna was kneeling by the kitchen window, planting herb cuttings in small clay pots. She hummed, not loud, not showy, just the same quiet melody she'd hummed the night before. When Luke stepped back inside, he watched her from the doorway for a moment before speaking. "You plantain herbs?" She glanced up, hands dusty. "They do better when they start indoors." "Never grew nothin' myself," he admitted. "Most folks think you need to know everything," she said, patting down the soil. "But plants just want care and time. They forgive mistakes." He liked that. He didn't say so, but he liked that. After lunch, they worked the garden patch together. The earth was still cold, but turning soft under the top layer. Anna taught him how to break the soil right, how to test it in his hand, not to dry, not to clumpy, like good bread dough. Luke, who'd never baked a thing in his life, just nodded. For the first time in years, he felt the ache of work that meant something, not just survival, but growth. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, they sat on the porch together. 2 mugs, 1 blanket, a silence that didn't need filling. Luke turned to her and said, "That stew you made last week reminded me of something I hadn't thought of in years." She looked over. "My mother, she used to cook with cumin and cloves. Said it made the cold less bitter." Anna smiled. "Sounds like she knew what mattered." Luke hesitated, then said quietly, "I think maybe I forgot what mattered. Somewhere along the way." Anna looked down at the small dirt stains on her hands. It's easy to forget, but the good things don't leave. They just wait to be noticed again. Luke didn't reply, but he reached for her hand. Just gently, just once. And Anna, without a word, let him. Dry Creek didn't gossip loud, it gossiped long. Folks there didn't come knocking with questions. They just stared a little longer when you walked past the post office. They paused a beat. When you entered the general store, they said your name a little too carefully, like it had grown thorns. Luke noticed it first, at the feed store. Old man Guthrie, who'd once sold him nails on credit, now asked, "How's the lady settling in?" with a tone so slow, it felt like a test. Luke just said, "She's planting sage and sweet corn," and didn't bother to add anything more. Back at the cabin, Anna didn't seem rattled. She still hummed while cooking, still swept the porch every evening. But one night, as they sat by the fire, she spoke without looking up. "They think it's pretend, don't they?" Luke didn't answer right away. Then, "Some do." She nodded. "People know when something's real, or when it's just paperwork." Luke swallowed. "Do you think it's pretend?" Anna finally looked at him. Her eyes didn't flinch. "Not anymore." That hit deeper than he expected. Not because it was romantic, but because it was true. She had moved through his life like water over dry stone. Slowly, quietly, but with permanence. She hadn't asked for love, hadn't needed it, but now, she offered it like a worn coat. No frills, no fireworks, just warmth. The next day, Luke rode into town with Anna beside him in the wagon. Heads turned. Mrs. Langford froze mid. Outside the bakery, young Deputy Miller straightened his hat, a little too sharply. At the Mercantile, Ruth Crowley leaned over the counter and said, "You two coming to the church supper next week?" Anna opened her mouth to decline, but Luke said, "We'll be there." Anna looked at him, surprised. "I figured it's time," he said simply. And maybe it was. That night, as they cleaned up dinner, Luke hesitated, then said, "There's something I want to say. Not because I'm supposed to, just 'cause I want to." Anna turned from the sink, drying her hands. Luke met her gaze. "I married you so you could stay. But I want you to stay. Because I've learned what it means to have someone see me, really see me, and not turn away." She took a step closer. "You've taught me that a man doesn't have to be loud to be strong, or angry to be honest." They stood there, not quite touching, not quite apart. And for the first time since the paper was signed, it didn't feel like a deal. It felt like a beginning. Sometimes the world watches from the outside, and gets it all wrong. But what matters is what you know in your heart. Has anyone ever misjudged something real in your life? Let's talk about it below. And don't miss where a supper, a song, and a slow dance begin to reshape everything. The church supper was held in the town hall, just like it always had been. Long tables of potato salad and fried chicken, kids darting between booths, and lantern light glowing off the beams, like old sun. Luke hadn't set foot there in years. He wore a clean shirt, pressed, though the collar still didn't sit right, and a pair of boots he hadn't bothered to shine since his father's funeral. Anna wore a simple blue dress she'd sewn herself, the fabric plain but carefully chosen. She tied her hair back with a red ribbon. When they walked in together, the room paused, not froze, just paused, like it needed a second to shift gears. Then, Mrs. Langford, of all people, called out, "A. Come sit next to me, dear." And just like that, the room exhaled. They ate. They talked. More accurately, Anna talked gently, thoughtfully, with the kind of grace that didn't need to prove anything. Luke mostly nodded, but he kept looking at her, and people noticed that more than anything he might have said. Halfway through the evening, the pastor's wife started playing the old upright piano in the corner. Something slow, something you couldn't quite name, but made you want to close your eyes and sway. Couples began to move. Luke stood against the wall, arms crossed. Anna came up beside him, smile soft. "You don't dance." He shook his head. "Not since I was tall enough to bump elbows with every girl in the room." She chuckled. "Well, lucky for you, I'm not too tall, and you've got strong elbows." He hesitated, then, almost without thinking, offered his hand. They stepped onto the floor. It wasn't smooth. He stepped wrong twice, apologized once, but she never pulled away. Just followed his rhythm, slow and unhurried. By the third verse they weren't dancing to music. They were just moving together. People watched. No one whispered. Because some things don't need explaining. At the end of the night, walking back to the wagon under the stars, Anna slipped her hand into Luke's. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. But he said, quietly, "Thank you." "For what?" she asked. for showing up beside me, when it would have been easier to hide. She squeezed his hand gently. You showed me first. They rode home without words. The clop of the horse and the creak of the wagon the only sounds. But in the silence, something unspoken bloomed, the kind of trust that grows only when seen, heard, and still chosen. It started with a fence post Luke had gone out to fix the north line. One of the rails had split during the last storm. He brought a shovel to dig a new hole, expecting nothing but rock and clay. But a few feet down, the blade struck something hard. Not rock. Wood. He knelt, brushed the dirt aside. A small chest. Metal hinges rusted, oak darkened by time. His own handwriting scrawled across the top, burned in with an old branding iron. LR. He remembered it now. Barely. The box he'd buried 12 years ago. The year he lost his brother. The year his mother passed. The year he stopped celebrating birthdays. He hadn't wanted to throw the past away, just hide it. Luke carried the chest back to the porch, sat down. For a long time, he just stared at it. Anna came out a few minutes later with 2 mugs of coffee. She paused when she saw it. You all right? She asked. He nodded once. Found something old. She didn't push, just sat beside him and waited. Luke opened it. Inside were letters, his mother's handwriting, faded but steady. A badge from when he'd been deputized briefly, before the violence of that role soured him. A tin photo of him and his brother, arms slung across each other's shoulders, both grinning like they'd never be apart. And a ring, not a wedding ring. His father's passed down once, then buried again like a memory too painful to keep. Above ground, Luke's hands trembled slightly as he held the ring up to the light. It caught the sun just so. I wasn't always like this, he said quietly. Anna looked at him. Like what? Closed. Silent. Hard. I used to laugh more. Dream bigger. Thought I'd build a life worth passing on. You are, she said, her voice calm. He shook his head. Back then, I buried this because I didn't think any of it mattered anymore. Thought moving forward meant leaving it behind. She set her coffee down. Luke, moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying what still matters, and letting go of what no longer does. He looked at her. You think this still matters? He asked, holding up the old badge. No, she said, honest as ever. But I think you do. And that boy, in the photo, he's not gone. He's just been waiting. Luke looked down at the photo again, at the boy who hadn't yet learned how much it hurts to lose. Then he set the badge aside. And the letters. But the ring, he held on to. That night, he sat by the fire, the chest now empty beside him. Anna crossed the room and said, softly, come plant with me tomorrow. He looked up. I've got seeds, she said. They need soil that's been broken first. He nodded. And for the first time in years, Luke Ramsey felt something in his chest begin to loosen. Not break. Just soften. Spring arrived for real that week. Not just in the weather, though the days had turned warmer and the wind more forgiving, but in the way things felt lighter. The soil had softened. The birds returned, filling the mornings with their ordinary, beautiful noise. And in the small garden plot behind the cabin, green shoots began to break through. Anna knelt there every morning, hands in the dirt, talking to the seeds like old friends. Luke would join her after checking the fence lines, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with nothing but his quiet presence. You don't have to sit here, she said once, glancing over. I know, he replied, but I want to. She smiled without looking up. That's new, he chuckled. Yeah, it is. The squash came in first, fat little leaves like outstretched palms. Then the onions, the green curling up like hopeful questions. And in the corner, the sage, her favorite, sturdy and fragrant, already smelling like something sacred. One morning, Anna stood from the garden, brushing her hands on her apron, and looked toward the cabin. I never thought I'd grow anything again, she said. Luke looked at her. Why? Because planting something means staying. And staying means risking everything. He nodded. I know that feeling. She met his eyes. Do you still feel it? He was quiet for a moment, then said, I used to think staying meant being stuck. Now I think it means choosing. And I've been choosing this place every day, even when I didn't say it out loud. Anna took a slow step toward him. Luke, she began. Her voice was different now, not uncertain, but vulnerable. He met her halfway. I know we started this because of a need, she said. But it's grown into something I don't want to name wrong, and I don't want to assume. Luke's breath caught. Not because he was afraid, but because for the first time, he wasn't. I married you so you could stay, he said gently. But I wake up now because you stayed. And if there's any part of this that feels like a lie to you, tell me now, because it doesn't to me. She didn't speak. Instead, she reached up, placed her dirt-smudged hand against his chest, right over the steady thump of his heart. I don't want to go, she whispered. Then don't. He leaned in slowly, not rushing it, and pressed his forehead to hers. And there, in the middle of a garden that wasn't supposed to survive the frost, something rooted. Something real. The rains came in June, sudden, steady, and unrelenting. Dry Creek wasn't built for that kind of wet. Dirt roads turned to rivers, and the bridge out to the west pasture washed clean away in a single night. Luke spent his days trying to salvage what he could, mending fence lines, rescuing feed sacks from mud, and praying the roof would hold. Anna cooked. Waited. Worried. On the third day, Luke didn't come home at dusk like he always did. She waited until full dark before lighting the lantern, and when midnight came with no knock at the door, she saddled the mule herself. She found him near the west ravine, soaked to the bone, pinned under a fallen beam from the old windmill he'd been trying to reinforce. Luke, she cried, dropping to her knees. He was conscious, but weak. Didn't want to scare you, he muttered. You idiot, she whispered, tears mixing with the rain. You already did. With a strength that didn't come from muscle but from love, Anna hauled the beam just enough to free him. She got him upright, got him on the mule, got him home. That night, she stayed by his bedside, wiping his forehead, whispering to him in Spanish and English alike, words that didn't need translation. When he finally stirred at dawn, she was still there. You came for me, he rasped. Of course I did. He tried to sit up. I'm sorry, I should have. She placed a hand gently on his chest. Stop, you don't owe me anything. Yes, he said, grabbing her hand. Yes, I do. And then, with rain still tapping gently on the window, Luke said the words neither of them had dared to name aloud. I love you, Anna. She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just leaned forward, kissed his brow, and whispered, You're the first home I've ever had. They didn't need more than that. Not vows, not grand gestures. Just that moment, soaked in truth, and the kind of love that holds on through storms. Silence. And time. Outside, the rain began to let up. Slowly, softly, softly. Inside, two people, who had once married for necessity, lay in the quiet, wrapped in something no law could define. By late July, the garden had exploded. Squash bloomed big and golden. The sage was knee-high, and the tomato vines climbed so fast, Anna joked they were trying to reach heaven before anyone noticed. Luke built her a trellis from leftover fence wood. She kissed his hand when he finished. They didn't talk much about love anymore. They just lived it. Luke still rose before dawn, but now Anna rose with him. She'd hand him his coffee, brush the sleep from her eyes, and sit beside him on the porch steps. They'd listen to the land wake up, chickens clucking, leaves rustling, the distant hum of a town just beginning its day. One morning, a letter arrived from the county office. Inside, a notice the marriage had been flagged for review. Someone had reported it as questionable. Maybe one of the townsfolk who still believed love had to look a certain way. Maybe just an old law catching up to a new truth. Anna read it silently, then handed it to Luke. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Luke stood, walked out to the porch, and stared at the horizon for a long time. Then came back in, picked up the old ring he'd found in the box his father's, and held it out to her. I know what we started this as, he said. But I don't want them to question it, because we haven't claimed it yet. She stared at the ring, then up at him. This isn't just to prove something, she asked. No, he said, voice steady. It's because I want to wake up next to you, knowing we chose each other. Not once, but every day. She smiled then, slow, real. And took the ring. They went back to the office the next week. Signed a new certificate. Not because the old one didn't count, but because this one meant something different. They wore their everyday clothes. No guests, no bouquet. But this time, when the clerk stamped the form, Luke kissed her, not because he had to, but because he couldn't not. Back at the ranch, the tomatoes ripened, the mule got fatter, and the porch creaked under the weight of two rocking chairs, always side by side. Years later, folks in Dry Creek didn't talk about the marriage that started on paper. They talked about the couple who brought the harvest cart into town every fall, who laughed softly under their breath, who built something slow, quiet, and unshakably strong. And sometimes, when a young couple walked past their stall at the autumn fair, Anna would lean over and say, "Start with kindness, let the rest grow on its own." Luke would just nod beside her, because love, the kind that lasts. Doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be true. Have you ever watched something quiet turn into something lasting? Sometimes the strongest love doesn't start with a spark, but with a choice, one made over and over again. Tell us about yours below. And if this story touched something in you, don't forget to follow along. Because sometimes the next story is closer than you think.